Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun runs north to south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
We'll start with the elephant in the room, or not even an elephant. It's just in the room. Afghanistan. You ready? All right. And this is one always surprises me, or in moments like this, where if they follow either you or I feel like they intuitively know the answer to this question because you've spoken very openly about what you would do, and I've spoken openly about my thoughts. Nevertheless, at least half the questions were of these first two. Question one. Andy and Jocko, hello, gentlemen. There are a lot of questions I would love to ask, but given the fact I'm doing this over the internet and not face-to-face, I'll keep it short and simple, which is not short and simple with that opening.
It goes downhill from there. Jack.
2 parts. First, if you were given the reins right now on our situation in Afghanistan, what would you do? You get to dictate the resources you need and the exact ROEs. Second, does the current situation seem to come from a place of neglect or malice on the part of the Biden administration? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this matter. A lot of people talking about it right now. So one, what would you do? You are king for a day. Blank slate you get to write. And two, we should probably discuss for people who have better understanding how the hell we got here. Because it's deeper than the Biden administration, in my opinion at least.
Yeah. I mean, I did a little video about kind of what I would do, and that's what I would do. Take over a bunch of airfields. Anybody comes near those airfields, we'd kill them and start doing strike rescue missions, go out into wherever we need to go to bring back Americans, allies, and friends, and then leave.
Would you leave completely, or would you leave a small force?
Probably leave a small force.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, and I was talking about it with Crenshaw when we first got here. And for people who have no idea where we are, we're at the Origin Immersion Camp. Thank you guys for putting this together, by the way. It's amazing. It's my first time here. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Very analogous to looking down a fire hose and just saying, hey, flip that switch. Just boom in the face. But we were talking last night offline and talking about where we were and the amount of risk versus reward, the forces that we had in Afghanistan. What was it, the stat you had was like 18 months since
It's been 18 months since until today. We haven't had anyone killed, but we had 3 Marines wounded today.
I saw that headline just as I was actually walking over here.
So the idea that we're going to not have a war anymore, well, guess what we got now? We were getting towards a no war. And I think
in Afghanistan.
Let's
not forget the other 60 to 80 countries that Special Operations specifically has a footprint in.
Yeah, there's a distinction between a war and being on deployment. And I shouldn't even, there's a tough distinction to make, because at some point a war turns into, especially with these modern wars, you could say in World War II, there was a day that the Japanese signed an unconditional surrender. The war was over for the most part. Yeah. Same thing with the Germans. They surrendered. That was it for the most part. There's still some werewolves out there that had to be put down. But with these wars, it's a slow kind of fade. And at some point, you look back and go, wow, we haven't lost anybody in 6 months, in a year, in 18 months, which is where we were at in Afghanistan. And if you haven't lost somebody for 18 months and there's relative stability inside the country, maybe we're not calling that a war anymore. Whatever you want to call it, it starts to become just a deployment. And guys have been going on deployments over there. It's like, oh, okay, are we going to a war? If you and I were going on deployment to Iraq in 2006, we would have had one mindset. If we were going to deploy to Afghanistan in 2020, we might have had a different mindset of what we're going to be doing. We probably wouldn't be seeing any direct combat. We'd probably be doing a lot of advising, some assisting, maybe some sort of battlefield advisement, but we were definitely not in a full-fledged war, and we had a relatively good control over the country at the time.
What would you describe it to people? What term would you use? The ideology, the founding principles of the United States, the things I think that you and I would be willing to lay our life down for, and those that we are fighting. What would you describe that conflict as? Because to me, it's almost a war of ideology. Perhaps that's a sloppy description, but I mean, so again, when people say to me forever war, I think less about the physical footprint and more about the enemy that we're fighting.
Yeah. So I'd agree with you there. We probably are involved in a forever war with an ideology that systematically rapes the little boys and girls. Like when you're doing that, yeah, I'm at war with you.
Yeah, I have to
We
agree.
can just go down the list from there. But
Part 2 of the question. Does the current situation seem to come from a place of neglect or malice on part of the Biden administration?
I think it's naive. I think it's just being naive. I think they're naive. I don't think they understand.
The Biden administration?
I don't think they understand. I don't think that they understand who they're dealing with. It's the thing where, let's say from a leadership perspective, you're in charge of a platoon, and you, Andy, can hump a ruck, hump a 100-pound ruck, 10 clicks in a night. And so you come up with a plan, and you're going to make it, hey, well, first night we're doing 10 clicks. The second night we're doing another 10 clicks. Well, you got guys in your platoon that can only do 5 clicks. And you just sort of think that everyone can do what you can do, and everyone thinks the same way you can think, and that's just not true.
I'm laughing because I've actually had this situation. I wasn't the one making the plan.
Yeah.
How do we describe this? There's some fat seals. That would be the only. The polite way would be there's a difference in physical capabilities throughout the SEAL community that manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah, and actually, to go in a little bit more detail there's a baseline of physical fitness in the SEAL teams. And it's a large percentage of guys. It's a 95% of guys, that maybe even 97. It's a really high percentage of guys that are good to go. It's probably, I would say 97%. And
especially earlier in their career.
Oh, early in the career, you're almost never going to have a problem.
Yeah.
Almost never going to have a problem. But you've got 97% of guys that can do the job. And above that, like, hey, if you can do 20 pull-ups, you're good. If you can do 30, I don't really care that much. No one really, if you can do 50, it's, I don't really care that much. I care a little bit more. I like it a little bit more. If you can only do 4, we got a problem. We got a real problem. And so it's a real steep drop off if you can't make that minimum standard. And it's the same thing with being able to carry a ruck. Hey, look, you can carry a ruck? Cool. You can carry some extra weight. Hey, every once in a while you get the big guys. Oh, I can take those extra batteries. Cool. That's cool. You're super stoked on that. Oh, you're stoked on that. It's cool. We approve. We like it. Fine. They get 10% extra credit in your head. If they fall out on a ruck hump, it's like hatred.
Oh, hatred's a good word for it. Long-term revenge policy when it comes to that.
So that does happen. That does happen occasionally. But it's very rare that a SEAL's not in at least good enough shape to do their job. Occasionally it does happen.
But I think, going to your point, if you could do 10 clicks and you plan that and people can't, and you try to force it, and then you're going to be moving during the day, and then they're like, we're going to have to cut through some low ground here to make up the time. Yeah. And it turns to shit. Yep. You need to realize when your plan isn't going well and change your goddamn plan.
And that's actually not the analogy I was heading for. It's a bad analogy. The analogy that I was heading for is that your mindset's the same as my mindset. And you think, I think, hey, I'll bring food and you bring food, and if you don't have enough food, I'll give you some. And then I think, if I don't bring enough food, he's going to give me some.
And it's then we have no food.
And then we have no food, right? So if I think that you think how I think, that's a mistake. So I think, Andy and I shook hands, so now we're good. Now he's going to do his part of the deal. And that's naive. As far as I'm concerned, that's naive. And I think that's the situation they're in. Dealing with the Taliban, they said this or they said that. And it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous to put some kind of faith and trust in them. And this is coming from, listen, this is where I was thinking about this as I was walking over here. All these things, I talk about leadership all the time. And one of the things I talk about, hey, if we can use your plan, cool, I'll use your plan all day. It doesn't matter if you're in charge of me and you come up with a plan, I'll be like, cool, let's use your plan. If you work for me and you come up with a plan, I'll say, cool, let's use your plan. My goal is to use your plan. My goal is to put my trust in you. That's my goal. The time that this fails is if you and I aren't aligned. If you don't want the same things that I want, then we have a problem. And now your plan doesn't really make sense to me. And my plan doesn't really make sense to you. And now all of a sudden we can't agree. Well, that's because you have a different agenda in your mind. You have a different goal. And so I think that's another problem that we're going to run into is we think, we just want stability. That's our goal. Hey, wouldn't you it's almost hard to comprehend that there could be people that don't want stability inside their own country. Well, guess what? That's happening.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it stems not from malice or what was the other one? Malice or ignorance. I think it's just being naive.
Yeah, it was malice on the part, neglect.
Malice or neglect. I think it's naivete.
Yeah, and I think they've gotten themselves to a place where they're crisis planning only. I mean, how many military operations between the two of us do you think? I'm going to say four figures at least, probably into the low thousands of military operations. Sure. How many have you ever executed that went exactly like the plan that you briefed? Yeah. Zero, which is a number I hate. I hate two numbers, 100% and 0. But on this one, I have never gone like, this is a great plan. And then just hopped off the helicopter and I'm like, oh, the door is inward opening from that side. Oh, that is a gate and not a shadow. But we also had so many other contingencies and leaders on the ground who would audible when the real world presented a problem set that was different than the PowerPoint brief. And I don't see I mean, that's where I will highly criticize the Biden administration. It's like, listen, obviously this shit isn't working that you're doing. Now you didn't really do much and it's crisis planning, and good luck with that, because it's going to be, you're fighting out of a wet paper bag blindfolded.
Yeah. As I said in that thing I did, you want to take ownership of what had happened. Let's say you don't want to take ownership and you're a real piece of shit. Okay, then you know what you do? Blame the Intel and be like, hey, Intel was totally wrong. Or, hey, we didn't expect these guys to run and they did. Or whatever other excuses he made. And then you say, but don't worry, I'm here to save the day and this is what we're going to do now. Instead, he's like, nah, well, let's go with what we got. Freaking awful.
People should look at the video as well, too, because it is a good description or definition of how you can take ownership. Because people are like, well, he's only been in the seat for 6 months. Like, that's actually how it works, though. If you're in the seat, you're in the seat. Which ties into my next question. This was like 75% of the questions. A lot of people feel that your video that you put up was your notification that you'll be running in 2024. So, I think they mistook the labeling what I would do if I was president for when I am president. What would it take for you to enter the political arena?
It would have to be complete and utter mayhem in the world.
What would you describe where we are right now?
I'll describe where we are right now. Everyone has an iPhone. Everyone has a car, and they're eating food every day. And we're doing pretty good. I'm talking mayhem. I don't want to do that kind of job, man.
But if you waited until it was mayhem, would you be able to salvage the ship?
Yeah.
What would you do?
I mean, follow the 4 laws of combat, right? Cover, move, simple, prioritize, and execute, decentralized command. Coming up with a simple plan. This is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I would also get rid of anybody who's been in politics for longer in their life than they haven't been. I truly feel, and I'm not a political expert by any stretch, but I feel like if you make it your occupation at some point, your priorities become misaligned with the people that you're supposed to be there representing and serving, and I think it's problematic.
It's a disaster.
Yeah, I'd say 8 years max, maybe even 6.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that would be solid.
Get in, get out. No 50-plus years.
Yeah, it's very interesting when people that have served in the government making whatever $148,000 a year for 40 years, but they've socked away, giant fortunes with millions and millions of dollars. How did that happen?
All right, you ready for some lighter topics?
Let's go.
Because those were about 700 of the 800 versions of those two.
Yeah.
And somebody who was calling you a war hawk, and I had a colorful response to him, so I handled that one. So that's what the internet is for.
What'd you say back?
I said, has anybody ever told you that you sound like a cunt? But I put a hashtag in front of it, so that's not actually an insult.
It's always interesting if you think that the guys that have lost a bunch of friends and seen what it does to families, if you think we're the guys that are wanting to go over there and go to war.
Last thing I want to do.
That's just a really ignorant statement.
Well, I think it shows, though, where a lot of people are. You either are in complete support on everything that these people believe, or you have to be the exact opposite. There can't be anywhere in between. Like when I was talking with Dan, I'm trying to explain Afghanistan and people who are just now paying attention. You're looking through a pinhole at an incredibly complex issue, and you're getting a snapshot basic, I hate saying it, but I was having this conversation with my dad. He's like, yeah, nuance is gone. And if your attention span or your knowledge, the depth of knowledge is 30 seconds long, then you don't have any nuance, because if you get past the talking point, what are you going to fall back on? Insults.
Yeah, and then I think a lot of it plays into our egos, where I just think I'm 100% right, and whatever little statement I make, I'm just gonna die on that sword, fall on that sword, whatever you want to say, because people have just gone crazy.
Agreed. Okay, this one was asked a few times too. I feel like you might have addressed this. What are you looking at before you start your morning motivation videos before you face the camera? Some of these are doozies. I'm like, damn, I actually want to know that too.
Just checking the flanks, man. Making sure no one's sneaking up on the flanks.
I have been so close. I think I've told you this too so many times, to just wait until your Monday video comes out and then just do one of my own, but like spritzing my face, because I'm not going to get up that early and work out, and just go the exact opposite with the extremely limited ownership book that I'm going to run.
There's all kinds of good comedic value of my friend Jeff Glover, Jiu-jitsu Jeff Glover. He does an occasional Monday morning Jocko imitation that are pretty funny.
Somebody was telling me about that, and people were legitimately getting pissed at him as if they didn't they didn't realize that you guys know each other.
Yeah.
And you two are probably laughing at it more than anybody
of course,
else.
Yeah.
On that note, what are your favorite memes about you? Because there are some good ones out there.
Oh, man.
Because I know some of this stuff comes across your bow. You got to chuckle your ass off at some of this stuff.
They're funny. I can't think of any on the top of my head. I think
the one I posted about us sitting down is one of my favorites. The exact same face. It's like pissed, tired, hungry. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think I did this video with GQ, which is like a...
Oh, I know. You know, they actually hit me up for that too, and I said no.
Yeah, good call.
Navy SEAL breaks down combat footage or whatever it is.
Combat footage.
Yeah.
And so I did it, and I think that's where, however I came across, and I guess I was a little, I'm kind of, I can be guarded anyways, right? But I'm going into do a video with people that I don't know, and it's kind of a weird situation. Like, why would someone so GQ, what this is a magazine about what, I guess basically like what men wear for clothing and stuff and haircuts. So there's no logical reason why this group of humans would want to talk to me at all. Not about haircuts, and certainly not about fashion. So I'm already completely suspect going into this thing. So when I'm in there, I'm thinking, I'm kind of checking my flanks in there. I'm getting set up. So I just said, and you never know how they're going to cut things and splice them and all this stuff. So I was just, all right, you ask me questions, I'm going to give you the answer. And that's where I think I saw some of the I would say these type of comments took over, and they're freaking hilarious, So pretty funny stuff, man. Pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, I've having known you for a while now, people always ask too if we served directly together. We never did. We would literally pass each other sometimes, but I've seen you in environments with people that you don't know as well, and there is that level of guardedness, and I know exactly where it comes from. But then people also miss like how hard we were laughing the last night, and just, I mean, if I'm there, I'm definitely going to be a jackass because that's just what I've been since. But it's very different. I don't think people realize like how. I would say almost soft-natured and friendly and comedic you can be. They're just like, no, Jocko only smashes. I'm like, hey man, if that's what does it for you, but like.
Well, that was weird. So one of the, there's a magazine called Success Magazine, and they did a story on me early. This was 4 years ago, something pretty long ago. And the guy that wrote the story came to my home to see and whatever, check things out. And they wanted to get some pictures of my garage gym and stuff like this. And so I'm walking through my house, and there's a toy on the floor. One of my kids, my young daughter left, some little toy on the floor. And I turned around to the guy and I said something like, I don't pick up toys, I smash them. And I laughed, just like totally joking. Yeah. I was like, I don't pick up toys, I smash them, like that, just joking. And one of the opening lines in the story. He says, as he walks through the house, he identifies a target. You know, it's a.
This is where the lore of Jocko began.
It's a this. He steps on it and says, "I don't pick up toys. I smash them." It's as if I was totally serious when I said this.
You have a good poker face, though.
Yeah.
You have a very good poker face. I couldn't tell, so we were doing a breakout session. You got delayed for travel. Pete Roberts, one of the founders of Origin, keeps talking up this special guest that's going to come. This is, I think we can probably talk about it. Who cares? The master has already gone anyway.
Yeah.
So you showed up, I think it was like 8:30 on Tuesday.
Yeah.
You're teaching. You go right into teaching. It was awesome. You're fully dominating a human being. Let's rip their head off. My God, I've been looking for this type of jiu-jitsu. I was going to say forever, but just the last 3 years since I've been doing it. So. And then they play some AC/DC and Master Ken rolls in. And I couldn't tell. I was just kind of watching you because I saw him coming around the back and I didn't know if Pete had told you. I'm like, I'm just going to see how Jocko plays this.
He hadn't told me.
And at first you're like, turn that music off. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh shit, this may not go the way it's going to go. And then I think you realized who it was. And then at the end though, you're like, show of hands, who thinks there shouldn't be any jokes in jiu-jitsu? And you were selling it though, the poker face. And I was actually like, fuck yeah. You're like, who wants to learn some stuff that might say, I'm like, yes. Yeah. And then you broke out laughing and everybody was like, oh. So
let me
you
give
have a
my
high level poker face.
So my perspective on that. So I've been through this once before, similar situation. You know who Renato Rarange is?
You were telling me about this the other day.
So
yes.
Renato, he's a funny guy, and he is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, 27-time world champion. Of course, he's really not.
Actually, I was going to say.
It's a character, right? And he came to my gym, and he like walked out on the mats or whatever. And
does he actually train at all?
Yeah. And he trains and he's good and he's absolutely hilarious and he's a great guy and he's funny as hell and I really like him and he made a show with Echo for a while. So I love the dude. I love the show. I love the character. It's freaking hilarious. But he walks into my mats. So I'm going to have some fun. So he walks to my mat and he's in character, right? He's got his black belt on or whatever. And he starts, like, what is this you're teaching over here? And I just turned him out. I looked at him just as dead serious, like, hey, what the fuck are you doing on my mat? I'm teaching a class right now. And bro, he was like, he just was like, hey bro, I'm sorry. So what they told Master Ken was, Pete explained to me later, they said, hey, just walk out, just interrupt Jocko and just take over. And so they played AC/DC and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I see him and I go, oh, this is one of those things. And I'm not playing. I go, I'm going to have my fun, right? He's going to have some fun. I'm going to have some fun. So I just like looked at him and just disregarded him as a human. And then I saw him, he was getting ready to walk on the mat. I look at him and he just like walks away. Yeah. And then I just continued to teach. And then Pete came up to me. No, Pete looks at me and he goes, do you know who that is? He's like trying to salvage it. He goes, do you know who that is? I'm like, who cares? I don't care. We're teaching. I said something like, we're teaching just dead face. Just like, we're teaching jiu-jitsu. Like, this is the most important thing in the world right now. I said, we're teaching jiu-jitsu. Let's teach this move. And he was like, it's Master Ken. It's Master Ken. Go with it. And I just shook my head. And it was kind of funny.
After everybody realized it was all a joke, it was hilarious. There was some tension-filled moments going back and forth.
Yeah. See, I find humor in those moments.
I do too, because you were in control of it the entire time, just owning free rent in Master Ken's head.
Yeah, he did his thing though. He's a funny guy for sure.
He was.
Lots of jiu-jitsu humor and stuff, so it's good to see.
Indeed. Do you feel a lot of pressure as your role as a veteran influencer / thought leader? That's actually not a question that was submitted. I'm just asking you that.
What was the question?
Do you feel a lot of pressure as your role as the main military influencer, hashtag, of course, / thought leader?
Yeah, I don't really see myself that way. So I don't feel any pressure about it because I'm just kind of doing what I'm doing.
Does the size of your following ever weigh on you? Maybe that's not the right term, though, either. Are you aware of it? Do you feel kind of like the gravity of the number of people that you have the ability to touch?
there's definitely a lot of people that I talk to and that I hear from that I realize are out there and they're stoked on, and they're getting good guidance, I think. So early on in my podcast, I was probably maybe like 30 to 50 podcasts deep into my podcast. And I was working with a client, as a matter of fact, and he was clearly, we were driving to a location for his company, and he was just fully in the game, listening to every podcast, and, had hired me to come and help with his company and the leadership and whatnot. So we're driving out, and I had already talked to Echo. I said, "Hey, Echo, I can't do what I'm doing. I can't do one podcast every week. It's just, it's really too much. It's not even just too much work. It's just not possible because I have other things going on, and it's not possible." I said, "Maybe we'll start doing one every other week, maybe once a month, something like that." So we're driving, and I'm driving with this guy, and I kind of broached the subject with him, and I said, I'm thinking we're probably 40 or 50 podcasts deep. There's a lot of material, and I'm probably going to, slow it down and do, like maybe one podcast every other week or maybe once a month. And the look on his face, he was driving, and he was like, "Well, you're going to need to, I don't know if that's a good idea." And I could see he was like serious, man.
Yeah.
And he's a really good guy and a really good leader inside of his company. And that was when I said to myself, "Oh man, there's people that are really listening to this and waiting for it to come out." And so that was a sort of pressure, and it's a good pressure, because for me, and I think really for everyone, if you don't sign up for something, there's a decent chance you're not going to do what you didn't sign up for. If you sign up for it, it's getting done. And so I just was like, okay, it looks like I'm doing this podcast forever, once a week, and that's the way it's going to be. And so that sort of pressure is a good thing. And I get more out of my podcast than anybody does.
I feel the same way too.
I get to read all the books. I get to actually sit down with the people. I get to do all the historical references. I'm reading 10% of a book that I read 100% of. So I get a ton out of it. And so the pressure to do it is a positive thing. And then, talking to people and as far as, for me, when I meet someone, and I'm sure you feel this way too, but there's a legitimate relationship that you have with everyone that listens to the podcast. People that will come up and do the little inside jokes from the podcast. Someone I've never met before, we have inside jokes that we can crack up about that no one else understands. And if someone listens to my podcast, then that means they went and landed on the beaches of Normandy with me. They freaking walked the Bataan Death March with me. They walked through the jungles of Vietnam. They did all those things with me as I did them, as I read through them and either read through them myself or talked to someone that did them. So we kind of have all these shared experiences and shared lessons learned. So now I have a legitimate connection with millions of people that listen to it. So I feel an obligation to maintain my part of the relationship, and that's what I'm doing.
The only thing I find weird about the podcast relationship with the people who are listening is if they've listened for a while, they know so much more about you than you know about them.
I agree with that to a point, but...
And I'm not saying it negatively. It's just sometimes you're like, damn, like I have more questions for you and you know all this shit about me.
Yep. The thing is though, when someone does listen to the podcast, then like I said, I already know that. I usually like, "Oh, you listen to all the podcasts?" They're like, "I'm on 248 right now." So they've started number one and they listen through. And so I kind of know where they're at, and I know that what they know about a big chunk of their brain, of their thoughts.
Yep.
I just met a guy here at camp that started listening to my podcast. Well, I think he said, 5 months ago, and he goes, "I'm caught up." That's a lot of
pack a lunch.
That's pack a lunch, and probably throw up that lunch a few times on a few of those episodes. But it's
that man's dreaming about you at this time.
But that guy knows we have a lot of shared experiences. It's what it's similar to, I guess, is when you meet someone, if you meet another team guy that you meet a new guy that's been done one platoon, You got a bunch of shared experience with that dude. You've never met him before.
Yeah.
But you know he went through Hell Week. You know he's in his first platoon. You know he's a freaking 60 gun. You have all these shared experiences, and he's like your friend, even though you never actually did anything with him ever before. But you actually did do something that he did. You have that shared experience, and it gives you an actual relationship with another person. And that's what I feel when I meet people out. And a lot of times people are super cool too. Like, sometimes they don't want to bother me, and they'll put the podcast on their phone and they'll hold it up and like give me a head nod, and they're just being cool. They don't want to bother me, but they want to say hey, and so people are just super cool and super respectful. And I don't have, I've got some friends that are actual like influencers, and there's a lot of the people that are following them are just straight transactional. Like, they just want a picture and that's it. They just want to, and so the people don't even care about them. They don't want to talk to them. They just want to get a picture and post it or whatever they're going to do. With me, people are, probably similar with you. Like, they want to come up and say hi, and they're respectful and cool. So I'm pretty lucky, man.
I think the best way to support you is just to wear a shirt with a picture of your face on it. Andy and Jocko, as someone who is currently in college and the military, how would you suggest approaching conversations with people who don't know what they are talking about? I find a lot of people I go to school with make very ill-educated statements about world politics and military issues that they don't really understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is something that you're going to be dealing with for your entire life. Your entire life, you're going to meet people that know less than you, that aren't familiar with a particular subject, that don't understand something as well as you understand it. And that's going to be your whole life. You're always going to be running into people like that. Sort of like when people say, oh, did you get bullied? Everyone gets bullied. Because when you're 10, you're the biggest 10-year-old. There's a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old that's bigger than you. That's going to crush you. And it's the same thing with knowledge, right? There's always going to be somebody that doesn't understand things as well as you. And there's also going to be people that are smarter than you or have better understanding. So what do? This is where what I think are the two most underused aspects of leadership, and they go hand in hand, but the first one is listen, and the second one is ask earnest questions. So if somebody has some wild idea, or they say something that I know is wrong, instead of me just saying you're wrong, which is an attack, which means they're going to put up stronger defenses, and now we're going to get in an escalated argument, instead I say, hey, what do you mean by that? And now I start asking, these are earnest questions too. I can't ask questions, what do you mean by that? I can't, those are accusatory questions. And there's a big difference between an accusatory question and an earnest question. So if I ask someone an earnest question, hey, why do you think that would be a better way to handle it? And now what I'm asking them to do, and I'm showing them that I have an open mind, and then they can explain something to me. They can explain their perspective. They can explain the way they understand it. And I have to be open to the chance that they could be right. They could be right. So if they start to explain something, I go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Or maybe what they say doesn't make sense. And so then what do? I ask another earnest questions. Well, what about this outcome? And what about this secondary effect? And maybe they've thought all the way through it. Chances are they might not have. And then what you end up doing is the truth ends up revealed to them, not by you sticking it in their face, but by them seeing it for themselves, which is a much better way for the truth to be revealed. And this is a practice that I utilized a lot in the SEAL teams, because there's always, everyone has a better plan, everyone has a better idea, and I would just ask questions. And number one, I would be open to it. So if I wanted to attack a target from the west, and he's like, no, we should attack it from the north, I'd say, hey, why do you want to attack it from the north? And you might say, well, because where the moon's going to be, it's going to give us better lighting. We're going to be backlit, or we're going to be front lit, or whatever you're going to say. And I might say, oh yeah, that makes sense, man. Let's do it your way, optimally. Or maybe, I say, why do you want to attack from the north? You go, well, the moon's going to be in a better position. I go, okay, did you see that intel that said there's probable IEDs on that road from the north? And you go, I didn't see that, right? And so all of a sudden, you can change your mind. Yeah. But I have to approach it with an open mind, and then I would just recommend listening to what they have to say, and then truly asking your earnest questions and look for some common ground.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever actually changed anybody's mind. I think I've had conversations with people where they arrive at the decision themselves, or like you said, the truth is revealed. I think that's actually the only way people's minds are changed. I don't think you can shove it down their face.
Yeah, imposing your idea on someone is very rarely effective.
Yeah, unless they're talking about flat Earth, and I'm just like, hey, fuck right off. The exposing, the allowing the truth to come out on that one. It's like if there was a flat Earth, people would obviously sell tours there because we are capitalistic assholes, and somebody would sell a tour or have a postcard. This one came up far too many times. How many times would Jocko sub Andy in a 5-minute roll, and how many Kimuras? At least 15 people ask this. Is that your go-to?
It depends on the person, It depends on what they do, If people don't have, some people are very susceptible to Kimuras, some people are not. Some people are susceptible to guillotine, some people are not. So kind of what someone gives me, is kind of what I'll take. That's sort of my game of the jiu-jitsu.
I think I could last 5 minutes because I can run faster than you. I would just get up and run around. I think for 3 minutes it'd be hard for you to get your hands on me.
Yeah, I don't think I would be unfortunately concerned enough to chase you one
Exactly.
step.
So there you go. Yeah, Jocko and I have never rolled, so there you go. That one's the one about the memes that I already asked you. Oh, this is a good one. As someone who started multiple business ventures, gym, writing, supplements, tea, etc., how do you structure your day to manage all of that? I know you wake up and work out, but do you restrict certain things to certain times of day, i.e. meetings, checking email, writing, etc.? Or is your day just heavily scheduled down to 5-minute increments? Teach us your ways.
So,
because you do, I don't know if you're doing a lot of things, you have your hands in a lot of things for sure.
I do both of those things. I do a lot of things, and I have my hands in a lot of things, and I also have a lot of things that are well, from this perspective, the easiest answer to that question is how do I get all these things done? Cover, move, simple, prioritize and execute, and decentralized command. So
that can't be your answer for everything, Jocko.
I know it's crazy, right? But you have to do that. And decentralized command, you can see when you come up here, we went to the Jocko fuel warehouse, which is, I don't know, a big giant building. Big giant building. You can see all the stuff that's going on in there. I think we bought it a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. Had to refurbish the whole thing, had to do a bunch of work on it. I mean, we had to buy it. We had to do all those things. And when you saw it with me yesterday, that was your first time seeing it, and it was my first time seeing it too. I'd never even been there. And this thing has been, and part of that's because of COVID. So, with travel restrictions, but because Pete and I are so aligned on what we're doing and where we're going, we probably had a 3-minute decision on that building, on the purchase of that building. And I forget how much it cost, but it's $1 million investment.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. It's $1 million investment at least. And it was like, hey, here it is. Hey, we got one that popped up. What do you think? Boom. Yeah. Did you look at it? Yeah. The roof needs work. Okay. What do you think? It probably $250 just for the roof. Okay. And what other options? Oh, we got this place we could do here and here, or we could bite the bullet. Oh, you know what? Let's do it. Cool. Right. Done. And then execution happens. So a lot of that going on. Same thing at Echelon Front. Just got back from one of these big events that we do called the Muster, and there's thousands of decisions that go into this thing. Where it's going to be, who we're using for AV support, what the desks are going to be set up, like what's going to be served for food, what the go bags mean. There's thousands of decisions that get made, and I probably make 3 of them. And the one is like, okay,
probably the city it's going to be in.
Phoenix sounds good, right? Like here's a legit thing. They presented the cities, and they had Orlando in the fall. And I said, hey, I'm from the East Coast. I said, hey, fall on the East Coast, especially South, that's hurricane season. Let's not do it then. Okay, cool. So we did Phoenix in August, which is hurricane season. And sure enough, there was a hurricane this week up here. Yep. So those are the kind of really big things. So from that perspective, decentralized command is how I operate. I've got a gym in San Diego. I got a publishing company. I got the manufacturer of clothing, the manufacturer of all the supplements. So all these things that are happening are very decentralized, driven off of broad guidance of understanding, like Brian Littlefield, who does a lot of the formulation. He kind of leads the formulation.
He's a mad scientist.
But he doesn't call me up and say, "Hey, Jocko, is sugar cool in this one?" He's like, "Can we make a waiver for sugar in this one?" He already knows the answer. Hey, Jocko, we could get this artificial flavor that we could add that would be a little bit cheaper? Do you want us to cut the corner? He doesn't ask me those questions. He already knows what the answer is. He literally doesn't even ask me. So all I care about right now, he knows he has so much guidance. I just want to know how it tastes. So I come about, I'll talk to him about the taste of things, but there's just a lot of decentralized command happening there on all fronts. And
do you limit yourself like, hey, I'm only going to do emails from 8 to 10 or put your, because people will do that type of stuff.
Yeah. You want to hear something that is interesting and cool. So I probably get 10 emails a day.
Is that because somebody else is filtering through?
I have everyone else answers emails so that the few that get to me are something I actually have to do. I don't get random stuff that's crazy. I don't get stuff like
Jocko sent me a lock of your hair.
Right. I don't get anything. The only thing that I get is real like execution emails. Hey, we're about to do this. Hey, we've got a client that wants us to do this with Echelon Front. Can we make this adaptation? So those are the kind of emails that I don't get. Hey, we want to drink. I just don't get them anymore. And it took me a while to get that going. And I just got an awesome team, and it's decentralized command. It's decentralized command because they can answer 97% of the questions that they get. They can answer without ever talking to me because they know what the mission is. They know what the end state that we're going for. They have so much authority to make decisions on my behalf that it just makes it really easy.
Makes everybody's life easier.
Everybody's life easier. Now, what I just didn't do was answer the question about like the day-to-day things that are happening. So the thing is, here's what kind of sucks. I have so much work to do that I basically wake up in the morning and start working. So I'm either writing, I'm reading, I'm writing, I'm reading, talking to a client. So the things that will be scheduled will be like conversation with a client, interview with somebody. Those things will be scheduled. But then it's like, hey, I'm writing another book. I'm preparing for, we have online training all the time now. And so we're preparing for that online training. I've just got things to do all day long. It doesn't stop. And so I just wake up in the morning and start working.
How far do you try to get ahead with your podcast? Meaning episodes in the bank? Or
I can't. I'm not ahead. I had one in the bank when I came out here, and so very quickly. It's 1 a week, man. I just don't have anything in the bank.
Yeah,
it's
sometimes I'm like that. Sometimes I've had like 4. I'm like, I'm never working again.
Occasionally I'll get there. Let's say I'd take one, or let's say occasionally I did BH Liddell Hart. The strategy of indirect approach. And so that was 4 podcasts. And they were all in a row. They were all, 2 hours each, just going super deep on that particular subject. So occasionally that does happen, but most of the time, as soon as I get done,
racking that round in the chamber, just firing it off.
Right now I'm reading 4 books right now. I've got a couple like long-term.
Personally or for topics on the podcast?
All podcast. There's no personal books being read anymore. And then I'm writing, and I got another book coming out in November. It's already done. It's edited, but that just finished.
The Echelon Front one or the novel?
This is the novel. Yep. The novel's coming.
God, I don't know if I can talk to you after you write that.
I recorded the audiobook. And it was crazy because it's me. And it's it's in a professional studio, and there was a woman there, and she was the engineer, right, the sound engineer, and then we had a director that was a virtual director, a guy from he's a stage director in Broadway, and then he does audio books, right?
Interesting.
I know, it's very interesting. But so that's who's listening to it, but I couldn't see him because he was virtual. He was over Skype or something, so I couldn't see him. I could just hear his voice. But then the woman, Deb, super nice, and she had no idea, hadn't read the book. And she had no idea, I come in there and she's looking at me like I'm a freaking Neanderthal, which is 79% accurate. And so then I start reading it, and so I can see her through the glass, right? And I'm looking at her, and like there's a lot of really funny things in the book, a lot of just funny conversations, and she's like laughing, and I can see, and she's like looking at me, and she's laughing, and it's great. And then there's a couple moments where things kind of come together and there's decisions that get made and she's sort of like gripping her fist like, yeah, this is freaking awesome. And then there's some things that happen that are really sad. And she, like I'm watching her, she's just like crying. And I was, and even as I'm reading the book that I freaking wrote, you get to some parts of the book and it's hard to read. It's very emotional. And so like my voice is sort of got emotion in it, and I'm looking out at her and she's just openly weeping, and it's pretty wild, man.
Jesus, I want no part of what you just described.
It's crazy, man.
Describe a memorable time you lost your temper. What did you do to remediate, and what did you learn from it?
I'm not real big on losing my temper. It's
I try not to too, but I've had some doozies.
Yeah.
Professionally at work and the teams too.
Yeah. The last time I yelled at someone was in the teams, and it was staged. I actually did it because I realized that someone had done something that they shouldn't have done and didn't realize how serious it was. And as most of the time when I'm talking to someone, they're like, okay, yeah, I made a mistake, and I don't need to say, I didn't like, hey, that was bad. And they're like, I know, I'm sorry, but I wasn't getting that reaction. I was kind of getting like, well, yeah, I could see that this wasn't that big of a deal. And and so I yelled, and then it was realized that what they had done was not smart. But that was probably, that was in 2006. That was overseas.
You got to use that tool sparingly too.
Yeah. So,
I have made the most mistakes with I don't have it, like I'm actually incredibly even keeled. And I think it's because I just laugh about just about everything, to include the really shitty stuff. Like the night I got shot, I was making jokes in the back of the Bradley as I was like getting driven to the hospital. I'm like, guess I suck at being a soldier.
You have an outstanding, I don't want to call it a defense mechanism, but it's like a coping mechanism, like what you just said. I've seen you, like we were hunting and you were freaking hating life about something, and just your attitude was really good. And when I was hating myself about something, I was like hating myself. You were at least having fun about it, So
there's always something or somebody to make fun of. No, I've when my kids were younger, and specifically with my daughter, I never really lost my temper, but just the inflection of my voice. My two sons, I think I could hit them with rocks and they'd be okay. My daughter, not the case. And you're like the flip side. What do you got? You're damn near all girls except for your boy.
Yeah, 3 girls and a boy, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you could talk to your son differently or with a different tone of voice. Yeah. I had to make a mistake a few times, and I forget exactly where she caught me, and it like in a moment in a day, and it was a snappy response with an elevated tone of voice, and I just watched her kind of like physically shrink. And it only had to happen once because I felt so bad. Yeah. And so for the person asking this, first recognize you made the mistake, and then see the impact that it had, and then it actually changed the way that I've always talked with her. Instead of like when she was younger, I would take a knee so we're at the same eye level, and it was that's where I learned it. The guys at work, it's just like
yeah. So the running joke with me is the thing that will make me, and I kind of jokingly lose my temper is electronic equipment like printers and copiers and stuff like that, because they never work the way they're supposed to, and they're stupid.
Could be operator here.
No. I pressed print, man. That thing should print, right?
There's a few steps, I think, in between that the machines are talking to each other. Trust me, I feel the same way. I have a very limited knowledge of electronics. If it doesn't work, I unplug it and plug it back in. And if there's a reset button, I will hit that. And then beyond that, it might get swept into the trash and just get another one that works.
Yeah. Check.
Jiu-jitsu. How has jiu-jitsu affected your body? Worst jiu-jitsu injury you have witnessed or personally experienced, and any advice for a new blue belt who wants to stay on the mats until death?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's break that down. First question.
First one, how has jiu-jitsu affected your body? Got any wear and tear? You got any disc?
I mean, I had neck surgery.
From jiu-jitsu, or was that?
I think it was from life.
Look at our old job, right? Knees, shoulders, necks.
Yep. For
most guys, I would say. But you look at like Ricardo Lebo.
Yep.
He was talking to Lee. He said he has, I don't know if you want to be open. He's got some disc issues, and I would imagine a lot of that could be maybe that's the type of the game you play though too.
It could be, but like I know a woman who's a school teacher who has massive degeneration in her discs in her neck.
Yeah.
She's a school teacher. She's never grappled a day in her life. So we could blame jiu-jitsu, but I don't know, man. I think they also, if you look at anyone's spine when they're 50 years old, there's degeneration in there. That's what happens. I don't think you can 100% say it's jiu-jitsu.
Maybe he's asking, is it possible to do jiu-jitsu for a long time and not have any negative impact on your body?
I think that the negative things that happen to your body from jiu-jitsu will be countered by the positive things that happen to your body from jiu-jitsu. So I think it's a net, and I think it's probably a little bit extra positive. So I think it's a net positive overall. You'll be in better shape. You'll have better awareness. You'll be more flexible. Like all those things are going to be good. Your cardio will be like, there's a bunch of positives. So may you get some, injury that, and look, I haven't had that blowout injury. I haven't freaking blown my ACL. I haven't had my shoulder blown apart. I haven't had one of those injuries yet. Freaking knock on wood.
Do you associate that with the style of game that you play, or maybe your selection of training partners that you roll with?
Selection of training partners, knowing my training partners really well. I think that's, a little bit of luck in there. Like I had a really bad ankle sprain. Like I had a high ankle sprain. This is the worst injury that I've had from jiu-jitsu. This is embarrassing. I showed up late to class. I was cold. This was 2 years ago. Showed up late to class. I was cold, and I walked out on the mat, and Dean, who's teaching a move, goes, "Hey," he goes, "Hey, let me show this on you." So I lay down. There's a freaking class going on. He's showing a move, and he has me in a Kimura. He's a cross side, has me in a Kimura. And he goes, "Okay, straighten your arm." He goes, now, he's like teaching them, and I'm kind of listening, going, "Okay, what does he want me to do?" He's like, "Sometimes the person straightens their arm to try and get out." And so he goes like this. And so I straighten my arm, and he was just trying to show that you can give someone a straight arm lock right there. And it just did it. He just did it. And I heard my arm pop like it's never popped before. Ooh. And I go, and he's like, "Oh, you okay?" And I go, "It didn't sound real good, bro." And so I stand up, I start walking around, and I'm like, I go, "We'll train anyways." And I'm like, I start training. I'm like, "Oh, this does not feel good at all."
Yeah.
And the next day I had to put on a sling, which to me was, I've never put on a sling before. I had to put on a sling because I couldn't support the weight of my own arm. And it ended up just being gnarly. It was really bad. It took a long time to heal. And that was just from Dean showing a move. And this is the immediate aftermath. He goes, "Man, I didn't know you weren't flexible there." I go, bro, you can't get flexible in your elbow. There's no such thing. It goes to 90, dude. I mean, it goes to 180. It doesn't go beyond that. You freaking savage. But as you heard me say today, or I think it was today.
You were teaching the white belts today, so I wasn't in that.
Okay, so I've been submitted by Dean like thousands of times. Thousands of heel hooks, knee compressions, knee locks, arm locks, Kimuras, and I've never been hurt by him. And I've done the same thing. I haven't submitted him that many times, but I've submitted him many, many times over the years. Never been hurt. And so I've never hurt one of my training partners in a jiu-jitsu role, and I've never been hurt by a jiu-jitsu training partner. So if you've got training partners that you feel like that's a possibility, there's probably something wrong with both of your attitudes with the way things are going. So
John Dudley might be screaming right now.
Oh, so that's the caveat. Yeah, John Dudley is the only person that I've ever hurt, and again, my fault completely because I was the experienced guy. But again, probably the reason I don't even think about him is because he wasn't really like a training partner. Like I didn't know him. We weren't rolling like a normal roll.
It was early on when you guys had started, getting to know each other as well.
Yeah. But not only that, he didn't know the basic, which I should have taught him. I should have been like, "Hey bro, listen, if you get in a tough spot, what you do is you tap." And he just was, he's such a competitive guy and he's so athletic that he just didn't think, he might've had a little bit of the thought, like when you start jiu-jitsu where you think maybe you can get out of stuff, and maybe he thought that. So when I put a stupid Ezekiel choke on him, and yeah, man, it hurt him. And it didn't even hurt him at the time. It was like like that day, he just tapped and then stood up. And so it didn't seem like I hurt him. That's another reason why.
It was a protracted, throat cancer concern type thing. What's the worst jiu-jitsu injury you've witnessed or been around?
So I did, like I said, I got a really bad high ankle sprain. I was rolling with my buddy Brian Sargent, who's the team guy, who's awesome. I know Brian. And he wrestled, and we were doing mad training, and one square was whatever, freaking passing the guard. One square was something else, and then one square was takedowns. And I just came out of whatever square I was in, and it was takedowns with him, and he shot I think he shot a double, and I moved my leg, and he grabbed the single and just freaking destroyed my leg as he shot in. And again, Sarge is a great training partner. As soon as he was doing it, he was trying to stop, but the momentum was there. So I had a high ankle sprain. I had to put one of those stupid freaking boots on for.
What about just in your time in jiu-jitsu from other people? Have you heard or seen the catastrophic snaps or breaks?
One that was pretty good was the what's the name of that move when you were asking
the wrong person?
Yeah. You might know this. It's like bicep slicer.
Yes.
So bicep slicer.
Conceptually understand this one. Don't do it though.
So bicep slicer, and this is another team guy who was passing someone's guard. The person was one of those people with a good game and had that bicep in there, had the forearm through, had closed that triangle around, and started applying the pressure. And of course, the team guy's like, "I'm not tapping to this.
Let's just go harder.
Let's go deeper. I go harder. I'm almost past." And then, sure enough, I was probably 10 feet away, and you could hear it throughout the whole gym. Oh, pop. And it was what is this? Radius ulna.
Yep.
Both of them snapped.
I know exactly what you're talking about, where you have it. You can enter it from lasso, where they think they're going to pass, and you're like, "But I just got your tricep and locked it,
and now I'm going to squeeze, and I'm going to elevate my hips a little bit."
Yeah.
And the harder they come forward, the more it compresses their own. Usually they tap, but he didn't tap.
So he drove into that and broke his own arm.
Broke his own arm. Yep. So that was. But here's the thing: broken bones are the best injury to get.
Because they heal so effectively.
Because 4 weeks later, then they heal stronger. What's horrible is when you've got soft tissue damage.
Those tendons,
ACL, MCL can heal on its own. I've had that. I had an 80% tear in my MCL, but I did that surfing like an idiot. So jiu-jitsu, I've been very, very lucky as far as injuries go.
Advice for a new blue belt who wants to stay on the mats until death. It's the tail end of the question.
Yeah, I think choosing the correct training partners. I think tapping early and tapping often. I always worked out. I always lifted. Whatever you want to call lifting. I always worked out, right? So I think some people, when they start jiu-jitsu, they stop that aspect, and I think that's a bad move. I think it's smart to train all the time and keep training, meaning working out. What do you call it? What does a normal person call PT? What is it?
Probably just working out.
Yeah. So I always worked out.
Season. GAINZZ.
And so I always worked out, and I think that has been one of the reasons why I have not been injured a bunch, because I always work out. I almost always work out before I train jiu-jitsu. So I've almost always loosened up my body. And usually I work out early in the morning, but by the time I roll, it's usually the afternoon. But still, I think that means, my body's very awake. And so I always do that.
There's some asymmetries for sure, much more pulling than pushing. You could, I feel it in myself sometimes if I'm more dominant on my right hip or my left, like a hip flexor difference depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think that working out is very important, and you should continue to do it. I know that I don't stretch enough, and I wish I stretched more, and I have been through periods. Stretching, in the prioritize and execute list of my life, stretching is at the bottom, and I know it shouldn't be, but I think in a very undisciplined way, I get no joy from stretching. I get no joy, right? Do you? Some people do. I wish
stretch
I did.
Exactly 0% of my available time.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that unfortunately for me is very unsatisfying. And so I don't do it enough. But if I was giving advice to a blue belt, I would say stretch, work out.
And he doesn't mean your training partner stretching you.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, it's involuntary yoga. We're not talking about that. If an error or a mistake is made, What's the difference between an excuse and a reason? Will you hear out a subordinate or peer if they have a reason? Does knowing the reason help solve the problem? So somebody makes a mistake and they're like, they're trying to explain to you why. Is there a difference between an excuse and a reason for failure?
So, what position am I in?
Let's say they are your subordinate.
So you're my subordinate, and something goes wrong, and you come to me and you explain to me what went wrong.
Yep.
Well, first of all, whatever went wrong is probably my fault, because if you, as my subordinate, didn't get containment set, it's probably because I didn't sit down with you and make sure you had enough people for containment. So next time I'm going to sit down and make sure you have enough people for containment. So that's what I'm thinking. If you say, listen, hey, Jocko, I didn't have enough people for containment. Cool. Not only is that my fault, it's my fault that I didn't have a good enough relationship with you that as we were going on the mission, you didn't say, hey, Jocko, I don't think I got enough people for containment. I think I'm going to need more people. Oh, okay, cool. So that's also my fault. So
I think an excuse is probably in how they frame it. I mean, I don't know your experience, but I would always list, like when things didn't go the way that they always necessarily went, I would listen to understand why. But if somebody was trying to throw other people under the bus in their explanation of what happened, it's like, we're going to stop right there.
Yeah, well, I guess the key component here is the reason that something happened is because I didn't proactively solve whatever it was. So yeah, there can be a reason. Sure. The reason that the enemy surprised us is because we didn't put out flank security. That's my fault. So that's the reason. Yeah. Now that I know the reason, and I know that it was my fault, I can fix it. It's different than me saying, hey, the reason we got surprised is because Andy didn't set flank security. I'm in charge of Andy.
Very possible that didn't happen.
I doubt it, but if it did happen, then that is my fault. So yeah, you can have reasons all day long. And if you take ownership of those reasons, then you get the problem solved. So
yeah,
that's no factor.
Yeah, reasons definitely exist. Last question. Be respectful of your time. In terms of extreme ownership, how do you deal with lies or misrepresentations about you or me? Do you own those too, or do you push back on those things?
So I'm trying to think of an example with this person.
Somebody's talking shit about you, or it's it's a big world out there.
Yeah.
People can say whatever they want to. My personal take on this is I tell people, if you hear bad things about me, believe every single one of them.
I was going to say they're probably true. Whatever someone's saying about, oh, hey, you should have done this. Yeah, I probably should have.
Yeah, believe every single one of them. And if you want to, give me the opportunity to show you who I really am. Absent, because right now, if you're hearing things and have no direct contact with me, believe all that shit. I guarantee you I've made some of the worst enemies in my life in the SEAL teams and people that despise me. So yeah, listen to all that stuff. And if that causes you to not want to give me the time of day, awesome, but I'm not going to invest any mental horsepower in trying to defend that.
Let me hear that question one more time.
In terms of extreme ownership, how do you deal with lies or misrepresentations about you? So let's say you see an Instagram, like the gram, where everything, let's say you see a post like, Jocko Willink is full of shit. Would you spend any time addressing that? So that type of thing. If somebody says or does something in that realm, would you address lies or misrepresentations of you?
No, I wouldn't. But I was trying to think of a real situation where this might happen, because let's face it, I mean, social media.
Let's say that there was a team guy, OIC, that ended up getting relieved at some point, and would say that perhaps the reason he was relieved is he was picked on by the trade at OIC at the time, and he was an excellent academy officer. These are all hypotheticals, of course. And the person that ended up replacing him overseas was just an asshole and had it out for him forever because his performance was flawless. And so that's his narrative for the rest of his life. And let's say it makes its way back to you. You're at a dinner conversation. Like, oh, hey, I met this guy. He knows you. He says you fucking suck because of this, this, and this.
I'd probably, in a situation like that, say, yeah, I wish I would have been able to do a better job of getting that person up to speed. And
God, you always take the high ground. Be like, fuck that guy and everybody he knows.
And I'd probably say, listen, it's very hard to convince someone and get through to somebody, and especially if they're in a situation where they feel like they know everything, it can be really hard to communicate properly to them. And I did a bad job of communicating, and I wish I would have done a better job, because then you had to backfill somebody in a platoon that had to take over. So, again, I think if in a direct situation, if Andy was running around saying that Jocko did this or Jocko said that, and it literally was not true, I would probably listen to what you had to say and say, hey, Andy, I just wanted to talk to you. And where are you hearing that from?
Yep.
Because if you pull the string on something, you get to a point where it's like, oh, yeah, Jocko actually didn't say that. Or if I did say something, then here's the context that it was said in. And you know what? I did a bad job. I should have put more context around it when I said it. And so I think I'm not too concerned about it. I'm not too concerned about it. And it's also a good lesson, like just running around and talking shit about people. You probably don't know what's going on.
And it actually makes the person talking the shit look far worse in the aggregate. Once people are like, oh, that guy is just off and around stirring the pot. It's like, fuck that guy. Yeah. Even if what he's saying might be true, it's like, eh.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, people have their own, you see the world different than I do, right? And you and I probably see the world pretty damn similar. We're probably overlapping on 95, probably literally 95% of you and I could be put in two different rooms and be like, what do you think about the situation? And you and I would probably align 95% of the time. 95% of the time.
Agreed.
And there's some people that they're not aligned. And that the way that they say the world, I did a podcast about this a while ago. Like the clinical definition of being insane is that what you see reality is doesn't match reality. That's the clinical definition of being insane. And what I was saying was everyone's insane, right? So everyone's insane because the way I see reality is different than the way you see reality. There's a 95% overlap, but there still is different. So you're a little bit insane. And we know people. We have mutual friends that, hey, they're
completely insane.
They're completely insane. There's some of our friends that only overlap, 50%. Because the other part of the world that they see is it doesn't relate. Like we're seeing it two totally different ways. So when you're starting to deal with people, the way they see people, so now you take that, right? You take the fact that you and I see the world 95% similar, but there's still a 5% difference. Now just imagine if you have this freaking paranoia about whatever, or you have a big ego that I brushed the wrong way, or you're insecure. Now you start to take insecurity and you take ego and you take those things and you pile that onto a 5% difference. It just gets magnified so exponentially that it's really hard. And that's what will make you say something that you believe to be true that is actually just like not true. And you actually believe it to be true. Jocko thinks this, right? Oh, Jocko, you could say that and you could truly believe it because from your perspective, that's what it looked like. So therefore, I know if someone's saying something crazy and it's not true, I don't really even blame the person. I'm like, oh yeah, that's gotta suck to be Andy and have this weird worldview that the way things look to him is that he sees me do this thing. He sees me donate to a charity. And he goes, yeah, there's Jocko running around trying to make himself look like an angel again. What a freaking jackass. He trying to show, he's trying to prove how much money he has by donating to a charity. There's people that will legitimately go there on stuff.
I know.
And so, I feel sorry for someone in that position. It's like, hey man, good luck, bro. I hope things work out for you. And if I can help you out, let me know. So
now that you brought up insanity, I have one more question. Does this surprise you at all? Does it surprise you at all, the team guys that have grasped onto some very deep conspiracy theories, largely around the last election cycle, who are very vocal about it? I used to maybe naively think that we worked with some incredible critical thinkers. And there are some guys out there, and the only description that I think is accurate, that have lost their fucking minds. And I'm like, God, did you think like that when we were serving? Like, what happened? I thought we had no selection process is perfect, obviously, but I thought we had a really good one to keep people like you away from automatic weapons and explosives?
Yeah. So there's a couple things going on there. And I have another podcast called Unraveling, which I do with my friend Daryl Cooper, and Daryl Cooper has a podcast called Martyr Made, and Daryl Cooper,
You should start at least 2 or 3 podcasts with your free time.
With my free time. Daryl Cooper, just a good friend of mine, very smart. He was in the Navy. He was in the Fleet Navy. Grew up in a really kind of horribly broken home. Moved around all the time. Graduated high school with a 2.3 GPA, but he got a 1600 on the SATs because he had read like thousands of books.
Yeah.
Just a prolific reader. And he wrote he had a thread on Twitter that he wrote a few weeks ago. And you have to pull it up and read it. His tag is @MartyrMade. But he just broke down pretty much, hey, this is why people are thinking this. This is why people are seeing a conspiracy. This is why they're going down that path. And he just laid out this. He said, this is why a Trump supporter, this is why they're saying this right now. And he just laid it out like probably 20 points. Hey, there was 4 swing states. And those 4 swing states happened to stop the voting election night at midnight. Like that's and he's laying it. He lays it out like these are just the facts of what happened.
Yeah.
These are indisputable facts. And so he just lays out what happened. So you start to line up those facts, and if you're already a little bit suspect, then you start saying, wow, that's interesting. So that's the start of it, right? The start of it is there were anomalies in the election that are, you cannot deny that there was anomalies in the election. You cannot, this is factual, that certain states changed their election protocol, which you're constitutionally not allowed to do. That actually happened. This is just indisputable. So you take that. That's what happened. And then you take the anecdotal stuff, right? Which is Donald Trump having a rally with 50,000 screaming fans in the middle of nowhere. And 2 days later, Joe Biden has a rally
with 7 people
in a populated place that has 7 people alone in their cars. Okay, and then you see that over and over again. So there's this anecdotal information that you start to put together that doesn't match up. So you take all those things and you layer them up. That's like part 1. You're asking me like how this happened. This is how I pretty much agree with Daryl Cooper, except there's one thing that I don't know if Daryl went to this part or not, which is then you take some facts, you take some anecdotal, you add in beliefs, right? Like, hey, watch a baseball game. An umpire makes a call. The one group of fans think it was the best call ever. The other group of fans think so. So why? It's who they support, who they believe in. So you add those beliefs into it, and then you take all those things, and then you throw them into the internet echo chamber, which is your Instagram and YouTube and Facebook feeds you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
That's what they do. They feed you what you want to hear. So you thought, whoa, those were some weird election anomalies. Then you get an article about the fact that those anomalies were actually planned weeks in advance. And then you get another, all of a sudden you build that echo chamber starts to get louder and louder and louder. And if you don't escape that echo chamber, you end up thinking, oh yeah, this is bullshit. And so I think that's what's going on. And again, Daryl Cooper wrote a great thread about this, and actually it got picked up. I mean, it got read on the news. Tucker Carlson read the entire thing and on his whole thread, and just said, hey, you want to know why this is, you want to know why people are suspect? Well, this is why. And it's the same thing right now you're hearing about the handling of the virus, right? Hey, you had people saying, hey, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, mask don't do anything. Oh no, you got to wear it. Oh, now we're mandated to wear a mask. You go right down that line. Hey, a few months ago, people that are in the current administration were saying there's no way I would take a vaccine from a Donald Trump vaccine. And now all of a sudden, hey, take the vaccine. So it's this weird world. Yeah. And if you go into the echo chamber with some of these, so you take some facts, you stir in a little bit of belief, you mix in a little bit of ego because I can never be wrong. You mix those things together and you can end up in a spot where you're thinking, what the hell just happened?
Do you ever watch documentaries?
All the time. I shouldn't say all the time. I've watched, if there's any type of thing that I watch, it's documentaries more than anything else.
HBO Max, QAnon, Into the Storm. Enjoy.
I haven't, so give me the premise.
How familiar are you with QAnon?
I'm fairly familiar.
You will be intimately
fairly
familiar after this documentary, the origin and inception, and it talks, I think, a lot about how it grows to people thinking that Democrats are literally surviving off of the blood of babies that they're harvesting under alien fucking spaceship control because of 1776. I mean, it's like it gets so.
And what's crazy, what's really disturbing about those things is that you can, at a certain point, if you do it in a structured manner, you can actually remove the layers and you can get to things in there that are factually true.
Essence of truth.
There's seeds in those things that start some of these conspiracies that are rooted in undeniable truth. There's things that are factually true. And you say, right? I mean, if you start unraveling the Epstein thing.
Oh, I know.
Right? So you start unraveling the Epstein thing. These are factually true things. These are things that actually happened without question. But then again, you take that, something that actually happened, that there's no doubt, that no one denies happened, and then you add in these layers of conjecture and suspicion and anecdotal evidence, and those things can get out of control pretty quick. And there's also some really, really, really disturbing things.
Yeah.
At all levels.
How awesome would it have been to be able to do like an OTB, mandatory just flamethrower as your primary? You get to choose your secondary, but mandatory is a flamethrower primary.
I'm already in, so we're good.
Of course.
Yeah.
At Epstein's Island.
Yeah.
When it was just packed. I mean, probably a flamethrower might not be the best for discrimination of fire, I guess, pun intended, for innocents and catching them in compromised positions. But it would have been so awesome just to burn that fucking thing to the ground.
Yep. It's really some sick and disturbing stuff out there for sure.
It is. Closing thoughts by Jocko Willink.
Thanks for coming out to camp, man. Appreciate it.
I've already discussed it with Denver and Erica and Lee. We're just going to block off the week for remaining years of our life.
This is like a good pre-hunting season situation.
Yeah. Is it always this hot out here?
No, it's New England, so it's just weird. You don't know what to expect.
In that breakout session this morning, and I'm like, this is the hottest that the earth has ever been, ever in any location. Just, I put my gi top on, it was just, I'm like, we haven't started, no.
Legit.
Awesome, thanks, man.
Thanks,
On the west bank of the river.
That's A firm, west bank. It gives me still give it to me in the grove.
Okay, one's in from the north. I've got the west bank of the river. Two's going to give it to you in the grove.
Roger, give me that gun run. Right along that bag, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, whether you're listening on an audio-only platform or you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate that you take the time every week to tune in. People ask me a lot, what can they do to help me spread the word? And the answer is actually embedded in the question. The biggest thing you guys can do to help me, if you enjoy the podcast and you think it would be helpful to others, is subscribe and share it with other people. And if you have the time, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. If you think the podcast sucks, tell me it sucks and leave a 0-star review or the lowest stars possible. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can go to clearedhotpodcast.com. And there is a contact me button right there, which will land in my inbox. And the last thing, if people are interested in helping out, what you can do is fly the old flag. And by that, I don't mean an actual flag, because I don't have any of those. I'm talking about t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats, whatever it may be. Again, clearedhotpodcast.com. Click on the shop tab, and hopefully something in there looks like it would be an item you would like to wear around town. And then you can tell people what it is when they ask you. But that is it. The biggest thing I can say is thank you. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, see you.